They called it our Golden Jubilee, a celebration of 50 years together. The hotel ballroom shimmered with gold balloons, long white tablecloths, and a band that played all the love songs of the 70s, songs that once made me twirl barefoot in our kitchen while my husband laughed and tried to keep up. It should have been the happiest day of my life, and in a way, it was. But as I stood there in my champagne-colored dress, smiling for photographs, a heaviness pressed down on me. 50 years, a lifetime. I should have felt secure, anchored. Instead, I found myself scanning the room, catching the polite smiles of my children, the weary look in my husband's eyes, and wondering if this was all for show. My daughter Claire had booked the ballroom months ago. She said we deserved a grand celebration, something that reflected the life we'd built. She arranged the centerpieces, roses with sprigs of baby's breath, the same flowers I carried on our wedding day. My son Daniel made a slideshow of our life, our wedding portrait, me holding each of our babies, family Christmases where the tree nearly toppled from the weight of too many ornaments. Everyone clapped and laughed at the old photos. I laughed too, but there was a tightness in my chest, the kind that comes when you know a picture tells only half the truth. I remember standing near the dessert table, the murmur of voices all around me when I heard it. They'll probably divorce after this. It was whispered, not meant for my ears, but I heard it as clearly as if it had been shouted. The voice belonged to Daniel, my own son. My daughter shushed him, but I caught her nervous laugh, that guilty kind that says you were thinking it too. I froze. My hand clenched around my glass so tightly I thought it might crack. Divorce? After 50 years? Did my children truly see us that way? Was that how fragile we looked from the outside? I wanted to march over, demand to know how they could say something so cruel on a night meant to honor our love. But instead, I stayed rooted in place, pretending to admire the cake. My smile never faltered, but inside my heart quivered like glass about to shatter. The truth was, I understood where it came from. Our marriage hadn't been perfect, far from it. There were years of distance, of arguments that ended in silence rather than resolution. There were nights I lay awake, my husband's back turned to me, wondering if he still saw me at all. Maybe our children had noticed more than I thought. Maybe my own doubts had leaked through the cracks in the walls I tried to build. Still, hearing it aloud from their lips, it cut deeper than any private thought ever had. The evening carried on. Toasts were made. Friends recounted stories of our early days, when we scraped together money for rent and laughed at the idea of owning anything fancy. Our grandchildren ran around the dance floor, their giggles breaking through the stiffness. Outwardly, everything sparkled. Inwardly, I was unraveling. I looked at my husband across the room, shaking hands, laughing in that gruff way he always did at social events. Did he hear them too? Did he know his own children doubted us? Or worse, did he secretly agree with them? I couldn't stop thinking about it, even as the music swelled and the waiters served champagne. 50 years, and our children didn't believe in us. That realization sat heavy on my chest, and I wondered if the night would end in celebration, or if it was really a curtain call. That whisper from Daniel didn't just sting, it echoed. It followed me through the rest of the evening, through the hugs, the laughter, the forced smiles for photographs. Even as I sat at the head table, gold candles flickering in front of me, I couldn't stop hearing my son's words circling like a cruel refrain. They'll probably divorce after this. I kept thinking back to when he was little, no more than 6 years old, rushing into the kitchen after a thunderstorm, his hair plastered to his forehead. He'd thrown himself into his father's arms, convinced the world was ending. My husband lifted him, steadied him, and said, "You're safe as long as I'm here." Back then, I believed it too. I believed we were a fortress, unshakable. What had changed so much that the same boy now thought our marriage was brittle, ready to splinter? Maybe it was my fault. I always thought I'd been good at hiding the cracks, lowering my voice when the children were home, smoothing over arguments with excuses about, "Your father's just tired," or "Mom's having a long day." But children are sharper than we give them credit for. They notice the slammed doors, the silences at the dinner table, the way two people can share a bed and still feel continents apart. The truth is, our marriage didn't collapse in one dramatic explosion. It was a slow erosion, the kind you barely notice until you look down and realize the ground beneath you is gone. At first it was small disagreements, money we didn't have, decisions about the children, late nights at work. Then it became about absence. He poured his energy into providing, into climbing ladders at the office, while I poured mine into raising our children. Somewhere along the way, we stopped pouring into each other. It's not that there wasn't love. There was. There still is, if I'm being honest. But love without attention grows tired, like a plant left unwatered. I remember nights when I would set the table for 4, wait with the kids, and finally admit he wasn't coming home for dinner. I'd tell them, "Daddy's busy, but he loves you." I wonder now if they believed me, or if they were silently tallying every empty chair, every excuse, every absence. Motherhood has a way of teaching you to carry burdens quietly. You learn to smile even when your heart aches, to make birthdays magical even when money is tight, to protect your children from truths that might scare them. But standing in that ballroom, I wondered if my silence had done the opposite. If instead of protecting them, I'd taught them that love was something fragile, something destined to break. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't just hurt by what Daniel said. I was frightened. Frightened that maybe he was right. Frightened that the doubts I carried deep inside had been visible all along, written on my face, etched into my posture. Frightened that my children had inherited not my resilience, but my uncertainty. When the band switched to a slower song, couples drifted onto the dance floor. My husband extended his hand to me. For a moment, I hesitated, something I never would have done in the early years. But then I placed my hand in his, felt the familiar roughness of his palm. We danced. To anyone watching, we looked like a couple wrapped in golden light, swaying together after half a century of love. But in my head, all I could hear was that whisper. They'll probably divorce after this, and I couldn't decide if it was a prophecy or a challenge. The clinking of silver against glass cut through the chatter of the ballroom. My husband stood at the center of the room, his champagne flute raised high, the spotlight catching the silver threads in his hair. For a moment, everything fell silent, all eyes turning toward him. I braced myself. I thought I knew what he would say. Something polite, practiced, maybe a few jokes about putting up with each other for 50 years. A safe speech. That's always been his way. Measured, careful, never too personal when others were watching. But his voice, when it rang out, was different. Stronger, unshaken. 50 years, he began, his tone carrying across the tables, is a long time to walk beside someone. It isn't always easy, it isn't always perfect, but it's been real, and it's been ours. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, the kind that comes when people recognize truth. I felt my chest tighten. He went on, his eyes sweeping the room but lingering, just for a breath, on me. We've had good days, hard days, days when we weren't sure what tomorrow would look like. But today, I want you all to know something. Tomorrow, I'm asking this woman to marry me again. My glass slipped slightly in my hand. The room erupted in gasps and scattered applause. I froze, rooted to my chair, unsure if I had heard him correctly. He lifted his glass higher. We're renewing our vows tomorrow, right here in this very city, and I invite you all to join us if you believe in love. Not the fairy tale kind, not the perfect storybook ending, but the kind of love that endures, the kind that stumbles, struggles, and still chooses to stay. The applause grew louder, some guests even standing. My daughter pressed a hand over her mouth in shock, while Daniel looked from me to his father, his face unreadable. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding, my thoughts colliding so fast I couldn't catch a single one. He hadn't told me. He hadn't even hinted. This wasn't part of the plan, wasn't something we had discussed or dreamed up together. He'd blindsided me in front of everyone, our family, our friends, our children who had just whispered about our divorce. Part of me burned with anger. How dare he make a decision for us both? How dare he use me as the centerpiece of a grand gesture I never agreed to? But another part of me ached, because in his voice, in the way his eyes locked on mine, there was something raw I hadn't seen in years. Not the businessman, not the father, not the man who always seemed just out of reach, but the man I married, the one who once stood at an altar, nervous and hopeful, promising me forever. The crowd cheered. Glasses clinked. People leaned across tables, whispering, smiling, already making plans to rearrange their schedules for tomorrow. And all I could do was sit there, clutching my champagne like a lifeline, torn between fury and a flicker of hope I didn't dare admit aloud. I forced a smile when people turned to me, waiting for my reaction. I nodded, even raised my glass in return, though my hand trembled. But inside, a storm raged. Was this his way of saving us or silencing the whispers? Was this about love or about control? The applause faded, the music started up again, and the party went on as if nothing seismic had just happened. But for me, the ground had shifted. Everything I thought I knew about how this night would end was gone. Tomorrow, I was expected to stand in front of everyone again and decide, publicly, irrevocably, whether to stay or to walk away. And for the first time in years, I didn't know which I wanted more. The applause had long faded, the band had packed up, and guests trickled out of the ballroom with hugs and promises of, "See you tomorrow." My cheeks ached from smiling, my body exhausted from holding a pose that wasn't real. When the hotel suite door finally clicked shut behind us, I dropped the act. I slipped off my heels and set them by the door with more force than necessary. My husband loosened his tie, humming low as though nothing earth-shattering had happened. He walked to the minibar, poured himself a drink, and asked if I wanted one. That was it. No acknowledgement, no explanation. "Are you serious?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, slicing through the quiet. He turned, glass in hand, eyebrows raised. "About the drink?" "No. About this." I gestured wildly toward the air, as if the ballroom, the toast, the stunned faces of our children were still swirling around us. The vow renewal, announcing it without telling me, in front of everyone. He set the glass down and leaned on the counter, studying me. "I thought you'd like it." "Like it?" My laugh came out hollow. "You thought I'd like being ambushed on the most important night of our lives? You thought I'd like having no say in something so public?" His face tightened, a flicker of defensiveness crossing it. "I didn't mean to ambush you. I meant to honor you, to show everyone that we're still standing, that we've made it." I shook my head, the anger boiling up with each word. "You don't get it. You stood there and painted us as this couple that survived everything, still burning with love after 50 years, and I just sat there, smiling like a fool, when half the time I'm not even sure you see me anymore." He blinked, as if my words had landed somewhere unexpected. Slowly, he walked closer, lowering himself onto the edge of the bed. "I see you," he said softly. "No, you don't." My voice cracked now, my anger slipping into something more fragile. "You see the woman who raised your children, kept the house together, made the dinners you never came home for. But me, the woman who wanted to be touched, talked to, listened to, I'm not sure you've seen her in decades." The silence stretched. For the first time in years, he didn't rush to fill it with excuses or brush it aside. He just sat there, staring at his hands, his shoulders sagging under the weight of something unspoken. Finally, he said, "You're right." I blinked. "What?" "You're right." His voice was rough, but steady. "I work too much. I shut down when I should have opened up. I let pride get in the way of telling you how much I need you. And now our own kids think we're about to fall apart." He looked up at me, eyes glistening in the low light. "Do you know what that did to me?" Hearing them doubt us? It broke something inside me. That's why I made the announcement. I wanted them to see that we're still here, that I still choose you. His words should have soothed me. And yet there was a knot in my chest, tight and aching. You can't just fix decades of distance with one big gesture, I whispered. No, he said, but maybe it's a start. I stared at him, torn between disbelief and a flicker of hope I didn't want to admit. Was he sincere? Or was this just another performance, a way to silence rumors and protect his image? I didn't have the answer that night. All I knew was that the man sitting in front of me, so vulnerable, so unguarded, looked more like the one I married than the one I'd been living with for years. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself wonder, could we really find our way back? Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay in the hotel bed staring at the ceiling while my husband's steady breathing filled the room. My mind wasn't quiet. It was a restless carousel of images from the last 50 years, circling endlessly. The past has a way of intruding when you least want it to, dragging you through the alleys of memory you thought you'd boarded up for good. I remembered our wedding day, long before the weight of children, mortgages, and expectations pressed down on us. I wore a simple lace dress that my aunt sewed by hand, and he stood at the altar looking both nervous and impossibly proud. When we said, forever, it felt like a wide-open road we couldn't wait to run down together. But forever turned out to be less like a road and more like a maze. There were years when joy came easily. Sunday mornings with pancakes and sticky fingers, road trips in our beat-up station wagon, the kids singing off-key in the back seat. Summers when we couldn't afford much but made adventures out of picnics at the park and homemade slip and slides. Those are the memories I like to wrap myself in, the ones that remind me that love really did live here. Then there were the other years, the ones that left marks no one could see, the slammed doors when arguments stretched past midnight, the stinging silence at the dinner table, the clink of forks against plates as the children pretended not to notice. Nights when I'd fall asleep facing the wall, his back turned to mine, miles between us even though our bodies lay inches apart. It wasn't betrayal in the Hollywood sense, no secret affairs or shocking confessions. No, ours was a quieter kind of hurt, the kind where love doesn't disappear, but it fades into the background like wallpaper you stop noticing. The kind where you wake up one morning and realize the person beside you has become a stranger you still share bills with. And yet, through all of it, there were moments that tethered us together. When my father passed away, it was his hand I clung to at the funeral. When he lost his job during the recession, it was me who reminded him that we'd weather storms before. We built our life brick by brick, some sturdy, some cracked, but it was ours. I rolled over and looked at him in the dim light. His face had aged, lines carved by time and stress, but there was still something familiar there, something that pulled at me. Maybe that's why I hadn't left all those years ago, even when I wanted to. Maybe deep down I knew that the love between us was still alive, buried under years of neglect, waiting for oxygen. Tomorrow we were supposed to stand in front of everyone and speak vows again. I wondered what words I even had left. What promises could a woman in her 70s make that a girl in her 20s never imagined? I knew one thing. I couldn't pretend. If I was going to stand there, I'd have to speak the truth, not a fairy tale, not a polished story for the guests, but the truth of what we'd endured. The hurt, the distance, the resilience. Because if there's one thing these 50 years have taught me, it's that love isn't measured by how perfectly we hold on. It's measured by how many times we choose not to let go. Morning light filtered through the hotel curtains in thin gold ribbons, spilling across the carpet and illuminating the quiet weight of anticipation in the room. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands folded in my lap, staring at the small box of tissues beside me. Today was the day. Today we would either step forward together or finally confront the truth of all those unspoken doubts. My husband was already awake, humming softly as he dressed, the familiar ritual of cufflinks and tie knotting a strange comfort. I watched him out of the corner of my eye, wondering if he felt the same uncertainty I did, or if his earlier bravado was just a mask. The children were staying nearby for the night, whispering among themselves about the ceremony. I could hear their quiet murmurs through the door, some skeptical, some excited, some afraid. I knew they were waiting for me to choose, and suddenly the weight of all their expectations pressed on my shoulders, not just theirs, but my own. I thought about the vows we would recite. What could I promise after 50 years of near misses, silence, and stubborn pride? What could a woman in her 70s with a lifetime of love and mistakes possibly say that would be meaningful, that would honor the journey we had taken? I rose from the bed and walked to the window, staring down at the city below. The streets were waking, the hum of life continuing, indifferent to the decisions of two people in a hotel room. I took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs, steadying the tremor in my hands. It was my choice. I could walk away, close the door on a lifetime of both joy and disappointment, and start fresh on my own. Or I could walk into that chapel, stand beside him, and speak the truth about the love that had endured through every trial, however imperfectly. I thought about our memories, the stolen kisses in the kitchen, the road trips when the car was packed with kids and chaos, the nights we stayed up talking about dreams that never came true. I remembered my father's advice. Courage isn't never being afraid. It's acting in spite of fear. I ran my hands over the dress I had chosen for today, a soft gold that matched the light spilling through the windows. My granddaughter had helped me with my hair, humming the same tune I used to sing to my children when they were small. Even that small act was a reminder of continuity, of the legacy of love I had created and wanted to preserve. By the time the first taxi arrived to take us to the chapel, I had made my decision. I would go. Not because I was sure we would solve all the cracks in our marriage tomorrow, or because I believed the past 50 years had been flawless. I would go because this was the chance to choose each other consciously, to stand in front of family and friends and declare that love, real, messy, enduring love, was worth the effort. I looked at him as he extended his hand, and for the first time in decades, I felt that old spark mingled with new respect. We didn't need perfection. We needed presence. I took his hand, and together we stepped out into the morning light toward a vow that would not erase the past, but honor it, and toward a choice that neither of us could take back. The chapel was small, intimate, sunlight spilling through stained glass windows and painting colorful patterns across the wooden pews. A few close friends, our children and grandchildren, filled the seats. The air smelled faintly of lilies and polished wood, and my heart thudded in my chest like it had when I first walked down the aisle 50 years ago. I took my husband's hand as we approached the altar. He squeezed it gently, a silent acknowledgement that we were both stepping into vulnerability. The minister smiled warmly at us, and for a moment I felt like the young bride I had once been, nervous, hopeful, and utterly in love. But this time, I also carried decades of knowledge, of mistakes, of endurance, of survival. When it was our turn to speak, my husband's voice was steady, raw, and undeniably sincere. "I promise," he said, "to see you, not the wife I thought I married, not the mother of our children, but you, fully and completely. I promise to listen when you speak, to support you when you stumble, to be present even when it's hard. I choose you every day, even when we falter." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. 50 years of shared life, of unspoken regrets, of quiet resilience, all condensed into a few sentences. His words weren't polished or poetic. They were honest, and that honesty carried more weight than any romantic flourish could. When it was my turn, I inhaled deeply. "I promise to speak my truth," I began, my voice shaking but unwavering. "I promise to honor the love we've built, imperfect as it may be, and to fight for us when it's easier to walk away. I promise to recognize the cracks, to face them, and to choose presence, respect, and kindness over silence and distance. I choose you, as you are, as I am, every day. I glanced at our children, who were watching intently. Their expressions had softened. Claire had tears streaming down her cheeks, and even Daniel looked awash with emotion I hadn't seen in years. Perhaps now they understood that love isn't about perfection, but about perseverance, about showing up for one another even when life is messy and unpredictable. The minister smiled at us. By the power vested in me, you are once again husband and wife. The word resonated through me, not the old, naive promise of youth, but a deliberate choice forged by 50 years of experience, love, and resilience. We kissed, a long, steady kiss that sealed the vows we had just spoken. For the first time in a long while, I felt the fragile walls between us crumble. We weren't children anymore. We weren't perfect, but we were present, fully, intentionally. Afterwards, the applause erupted. Our grandchildren ran to hug us, friends offered congratulations, and the warmth of the room wrapped around us. Yet beneath the celebration, I felt a quiet, private triumph. This wasn't about proving anything to the world. This was about reclaiming our love, acknowledging our flaws, and stepping forward together. As we walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, I felt lighter. The whispers, the doubts, the fear, they hadn't vanished, but they no longer held power over us. Our love wasn't a fairy tale. It was real, resilient, and ours. For the first time in decades, I truly believed that enduring love wasn't just about surviving. It was about choosing each other, every day, in spite of everything. The reception that followed the vow renewal was quieter than our anniversary party had been, but it felt warmer, more genuine. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the small event space, glinting off champagne flutes and casting a soft glow over familiar faces. There was laughter, yes, but it wasn't forced. There was dancing, but it wasn't performative. There was love, messy, imperfect, but undeniably present. Our children approached us cautiously at first, hesitant as though testing the waters of a truth they hadn't expected to see. Claire took my hand, her eyes brimming with tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't see how strong your love really is. Daniel stood beside her, still more reserved, but his voice trembled when he said, "We misjudged you, both of you. I see it now." Hearing them say this didn't erase the years of doubt, but it was a balm, a recognition that even children can learn, even late, that love isn't always visible on the surface, that it can persist quietly, even when it seems fragile. As I watched my husband spin slowly with me on the dance floor, I realized that the celebration wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It wasn't about winning over skeptical children or impressing friends. It was about reclaiming the narrative of our life together, acknowledging both the scars and the victories, and choosing presence over absence. I caught my reflection in the tall windows, the woman who had stood at the altar 50 years ago, nervous and hopeful, and the woman who now stood there, seasoned and wise, a survivor of love's trials. There was a quiet strength in that reflection, a reminder that love isn't about never breaking. It's about finding the courage to repair, rebuild, and keep choosing each other despite the imperfections. The room buzzed with conversation, children chasing grandchildren, friends exchanging congratulations. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I felt a calm settle over me. This was not a fairy tale ending. It was something far better. It was real, resilient, and ours. I leaned into my husband, feeling the familiar roughness of his hand against mine, and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." He smiled, his eyes glinting with emotion. "I always will." For the first time in decades, I truly understood that enduring love isn't measured by flawless days or perfect gestures. It's measured by the deliberate choice to stay, to show up, and to honor one another in all our messy, human glory. And so, as the celebration wound down and our guests began to leave, I felt a quiet pride. Not for the spectacle, not for the applause, but for the decision we had made together. A decision that reaffirmed our love, taught our children about resilience, and reminded us both that the story of us isn't defined by whispers of doubt. It's defined by our unwavering commitment to each other. That night, as I lay beside him, I knew the truth. Love isn't perfect. It isn't always easy. But when it's chosen again and again, even after decades of challenges, it becomes something stronger, something sacred, something worth celebrating every single day. And for us, that celebration had just begun.